I just don't see another path. I just don't ever quit. You know, like I would never, you know when something is done. You know when something is good enough. And you also, if you're honest with yourself. And it's so tough, right? Like it's this constant balancing act between, am I wasting my time, you know, by continuing to go down this path, or is this a speed bump? I think we really struggle to understand the difference between a speed bump and a mountain, right? It's like, there's sometimes things might feel like a mountain, but when you take a step back, it's just a hill or a speed bump. So I think that the trouble when people give up too soon, they never really get to feel what it's like to get on the other side of that. That muscle to be able to hunker down and like break through, as you do that more and more with your career, it compounds. And so what happens, and I'm sure you guys see this with me too, like I just don't see problems. Like I know that almost like 99.9% of things in life are speed bumps. I just don't see mountains because they don't exist. There are so few problems that are really, really that bad.
So tell me, so what's new with you, man? Where are you at in your journey?
Now is the hardest time with me, just getting adjusted to the new way of searching for employment and connections and reaching out. I was at web.com for 11 years. Like when I found that job, it was just, I knew someone that worked there. And they were like, hey, just come on in. You don't even have to.
That's still kind of how it is.
It's still, but it's a few different other aspects of it.
Like what? Like
well, just the LinkedIn part of it. Like I was not familiar with LinkedIn at all.
So what do you think? I mean, again, what companies are you looking at? Are there companies that you're targeting right now? Or are you still just looking for the right opportunity?
I'm just looking for the right opportunity at this point. You know, just kind of getting my feet wet and just having conversations.
It's right to take time off though, man. Too many people don't do it. And I mean, look, you were there for 11 years, man. Yeah. So it's very rare. And most people, whenever we hire them, I tell them, I'm like, take like 2 weeks off, take a week off, because you just don't get those breaks very often.
You don't get it.
It's interesting. I'll tell you, man, my experience at early stage startups, guys like you who are coming out of more of a system and processes, etc. The thing they sometimes struggle with is you don't get a lot of that. Meaning what happens when you go to a company where, especially if you want to kind of come over as a leader, you know, at a Series A company, maybe there's one other leader, maybe you are the leader, and the CEO is usually trying to hire people that they feel they can kind of offload it to. And they're usually not a very good coach or support because they're hiring people that they think should know how to do the job. It's bullshit, by the way. It really is, because your job as the CEO is to develop people. Of course you hire people to be competent, but to think you don't owe it to them to develop them. But there's a lot of advantages too of just jumping in and trying to do it from scratch.
People tend to give up too early. And it's so tough, right? Like, look, leaving a bad job situation, there's different things, but there's also so much in just like, you know what? This manager is not giving me exactly what I want, but I do want to grow. The role itself gives me a chance to do it, so I'm going to invest in my own learning, and I'm going to do that for 6 months, you know, as opposed to like, I'm going to go try to find something else and the grass is greener, right? So I feel like people just keep short-circuiting themselves because every time they run into a steep hill, they blame the hill for being steep as opposed to like getting over it and trying to get on the other side of it.
And I think a lot of persistence is the ability to create continued discipline in your life to where you trust that you'll get past it on the other side. And so I thought that was a really unique way that somebody put it, which is like, you know, persistence is just like implementing like discipline into the way that you view things and you view tasks like over and over and over again, and then it just becomes like your core. Persistence too, I think, is also knowing when to give up. I think the counterpoint to persistence is, how do you know when it is time? It's such a personal question to know like when's the exact when's the perfect time to give up. It's probably like you almost rarely give up. I think you just realize like based on where you're at this point in your life, like can you make it work?
I mean, look, I think being an entrepreneur, you're constantly challenged. I mean, you're constantly thinking about the trade-offs between growing a company, taking money out, how much do you want to grow? Like, and there's lots of choices. I can persist through and keep hiring and see what happens on the other side of it. I can not do that and just buckle down. So I feel like you have to trust your intuition or your gut a lot.
So it was a year ago today that I found Emily wandering the streets of Austin.
Actually, it was like a month before that.
Just wandering around aimlessly.
Got brought in like a homeless cat. This is, I don't know who's that is either. This is me.
We gotta show. Do you guys want to see how Emily got hired?
This is, yes.
I
That's
forgot.
not even a good video.
I've got to show. I've got to
This
show
is
it.
Sharon. This
Hold
is
on.
Sharon.
Do we need to airplay it? Do we need to turn the TV?
No, I made a video.
Are you gonna use one of these?
Turn it up. This is good.
Go, Emily.
I know, right?
I just don't see another path. I just don't ever quit. You know, like I would never, you know when something is done. You know when something is good enough. And you also know if you're honest with yourself. I think that's it. You have to learn, by being persistent, you'll learn to be honest with yourself to the point where then persistence isn't a thing. Because that's just your modus operandi. You know, you just are always pushing to like whatever that like the end is, you know, like that death that you were supposed to do and you know it's not baked, but you nailed it in any way. And as you cycle through and you're like, and now it's to here, it's like, no, that's not an option. I am the idiot who overbooked my calendar the 2 days before, and now I've got to go clean up my mess and persist through it to get this thing done. That is how you master time management, right? Managing your calendar in advance, weeks out, eliminating the distraction of email, and making sure that each week you have time to think, right? And I'm telling you, that is what goes into making you successful every day, whether you're on the front lines or whether you're the CEO. It just comes a point, I think, if you just continue to think like that. My job is, if I take something on, is to get everything to 100%. And that could be like my use of this job. I've been in the same sales role for 2 years. I'm the #1 rep. There's no opportunity for me to grow into an enterprise role. That's when you leave. You've persisted to the 100%. You've mastered that mid-market sale, and you've not in a quarter or 4 months. You've done it for 9 to 10 months or a year. Like, this isn't a fluke, and you're being honest with yourself. Like, am I in the right territory?
What advice would you give to a VP who's been fired for the first time?
That life is just fine, like nothing will change, like you're gonna be fine. I think that it's really tough when you're in it. I can tell you, like when I remember when I got fired for the first time when I was a VP, it was so horrible. God bless this HR woman. She was junior, she was an overhead. She comes into my office the morning of, right? And she's like, Jake, you should really go, why don't you go, explore Sausalito today? I'm like, what the are you talking about? I'm like, oh. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so I was like that. It really stung because I felt like, I think what stung the most, I felt like my job wasn't done. I felt like I was like just getting there. That's candidly what stung the most, as opposed to getting fired. I've been fired like from a different sales role from telling my boss to off, but that was a whole other, don't do that. So I've been fired before and cried on the way home and listened to Train and shit and had my pity party about it. But I think the biggest regret that I had is I felt like I was incomplete. You can figure this thing out. And I think it's really tough to persist if you don't have a belief that the problem is solvable. And that's probably why a lot of people give up. It goes back to that speed bumps, hills, mountains analogy, right? It's, if all you see is mountains, you're never going to persist. If everything is a challenge and everything is this, as opposed to just some belief that I'm going to figure this out, so I'm going to keep going. That's probably the essence of persistence, is that you believe that there's a path to be successful. That's some early morning waxing there, man. Blame the hill for being steep. Oof, that was fucking good.
I was like, okay, this is the part that's so hard.